queues. They are part of the British DNA. We learn to walk, talk and then queue. Whether we're queuing up for a refund at a clothing store, lining up to buy a stamp at the post office, waiting to board a plane, or even just joining a neat line of people to grab a bite to eat at a food stall, we do it correctly. We stand calmly, we make polite chit-chat with people directly in front and behind, and we rarely raise our voice above library level. We keep the line straight if the environment allows, and we never, ever, skip past anyone. That is just more un-British than disliking tea. Perhaps then, it is unsurprising that a major storm happened when Holly Willoughby and Phillip Schofield were pictured seemingly skipping the queue at the late Queen Elizabeth's lying-in state. On September 14, 2022, the former besties Holly and Phil were given priority access to the venue, and what followed was, well, outrage, which dominated the headlines, resulting in a petition being launched, calling for the disrespectful duo to be removed from television altogether. The suggestion that Phil and Holly had jumped ahead of the public to pay their respects in Westminster Hall had ushered in a deadly transition which could be said was the beginning of the end for the former besties. Viewers were no longer laughing with the breakfast duo as they giggled over the absurdities of life, but were either livid or laughing very much at them and flooding the internet with queue-jumping jokes. At the time, one Twitter user wrote, "So Phil and Holly got a fast track to the coffin and didn't have the common decency to queue along with many elderly or British citizens or even David Beckham. They should feel embarrassed and ashamed. It's not Alton Towers." Another said, "Holly and Phil, hang your heads in shame. Totally disgusted in you, queue jumping, no excuse for it whatsoever." Schofield's advert slogan was also trending on Twitter with "We buy any car" being changed to "We jump any queue." But did they jump the queue, then lie about it? Blinkerhole is going to take another look at what went down in the Queuegate scandal and will bring you our conclusion at the end of this video. At the time, while the public continued to show no mercy, Holly and Phil were apparently both left in tears, and sources said the pair wished they hadn't gone there, as the episode appears to have tarnished their once squeaky clean reputations. That in itself, in our opinion, proves that those tears were not remorse for their actions, but tears for themselves and their own careers. With big brands wavering over their association with the pair, it seemed the scandal had hit them where it hurts, their pockets. Senior figures at ITV were said to be seething. Michael Jimmy, the channel's director of news and current affairs, and his team meticulously planned their coverage for the Queen's death and subsequent funeral for years, and some were furious their hard work had been overshadowed by Schofield and Willoughby. One well-placed journalist said, "People aren't talking about our fantastic news output. They're talking about Phil and Holly, who decided at the last minute that they'd quite like to join in." Their anger was echoed by the pair's bosses over at the entertainment arm of ITV. One source said, "They didn't have to be there for the segment they ran on the television. They did not have to be inside the building for what they ended up showing on the television." The reference was to an 11-minute clip aired at the beginning of the program. In a roundup of events, Holly Willoughby showed pictures of her 3 children laying flowers at Buckingham Palace, as well as a letter her daughter Belle wrote to the late monarch. It was described by some colleagues as self-indulgent. The pre-recorded segment ended with the pair on Westminster Bridge discussing the visit. "It was one of the most profound moments of my life," Schofield said. The footage inside Westminster Hall was taken from the official feed because media outlets were not allowed to film inside. Holly, who did the voiceover for the clip, ended by saying that they were there for the purpose of reporting on the event for millions of people who haven't been able to get to Westminster. Many at ITV questioned the strategy, but sources close to Miss Willoughby at the time said she fought all of the way to say her piece and set the record straight. Television insiders, though, voiced surprise at why This Morning would screen a report from the Queen's lying in state at Westminster Hall a day after her funeral and burial had taken place, making it old news by the Tuesday. ITV responded by saying that the pair, who had personal assistants and a big production team, failed to send their requests for accreditation in time to go any earlier. It took almost 24 hours before ITV jumped to the presenter's defense, with a statement saying that they were there to report, along with journalists and broadcasters. But Holly Willoughby had already had enough of waiting. Her lawyer Stephen Shotness from Fitzrovia law firm Simons Muirhead Burton reminded journalists that suggesting his client had been doing anything but working would be misleading and defamatory. When ITV This Morning bosses finally released a statement, they said, "We would like to clarify something. We asked Phillip and Holly to be part of a film for this Tuesday's program. They did not jump the queue, have VIP access or file past the Queen lying in state, but instead were there in a professional capacity as part of the world's media to report on the event. ITV Chief Executive Dame Carolyn McCall also said the presenters did nothing wrong. Speaking at the RTS London convention, she said the pair had accreditation and were sent by This Morning to do a piece. She said Willoughby and Schofield had been very misrepresented. An ITV spokesperson later added in a statement to Mail Online, This Morning had press accreditation and, like other media, Phillip and Holly were escorted to work from the press gallery by government staff. They did not file past the Queen's coffin. They were there alongside a host of other broadcasters and national press outlets for an item that will be broadcast on Tuesday's show. Any allegations of improper behavior are categorically untrue. A source told Mail Online, they did not get to pay their respects to the Queen in the same way as queuing members of the public, but they filmed in a section put aside for press. A week after the distasteful incident, Holly and Phil were forced to address the backlash on This Morning, with Holly saying, like hundreds of accredited broadcasters and journalists, we were given official permission to access the hall. It was strictly for the purpose of reporting on the event for millions of people in the UK who haven't been able to visit Westminster in person. The rules were that we would be quickly escorted around the edges to a platform at the back. In contrast, those paying their respects walked along a carpeted area beside the coffin and were given time to pause. None of the journalists and broadcasters there took anyone's place in the queue, and no one filed past the Queen. She continued, we, of course, respected those rules. However, we realized that it may have looked like something else and therefore totally understand the reaction. Please know that we would never jump a queue. The statement did not go down well with the public, with one viewer responding, I'm afraid that so-called explanation was way off the mark. At the end of the day, Holly and Phil got to see, experience and feel that atmosphere and moment, all with the privilege of no queue. Us Brits are all about fairness. This wasn't. Another added, you are not journalists and your excuse for being allowed in didn't stand up. One This Morning viewer was even stronger in their condemnation, saying, absolutely disgusting. Tuned in for the last time today to give them both the opportunity to be honest and apologize to the viewers for thinking they are more important. Instead, they decided to keep going with the lies and disrespectful behavior. You claimed you were reporting for the world when it was literally on every channel. Just apologize, hold your hands up and say you were wrong. Holly and Phil's response also led to renewed calls for them to be removed from This Morning. One viewer said online, really think ITV should think seriously about sacking Phillip Schofield and Holly Willoughby. They are tone deaf to people's feelings and sensitivities, thinking they can arrogantly laugh things off. Phillip Schofield tried to explain how people weren't allowed to film inside when challenged about how nothing was ever broadcast to prove he and Willoughby were there in a journalistic capacity. But Phillip was caught somewhat on the hop as he was accosted by press outside his home, where they were eager to get his side of the story after ITV had issued their statement. He was asked if he felt vindicated, to which Schofield replied, I think that it was a shame that what happened. When asked if he also believed he had been unfairly targeted, Schofield said, I think we were. The GB News journalist then pointed out how the pair were never accredited, as their names were down under their editor's name. We were, Schofield hit back. Because we didn't want to give our email addresses away. He was then told that he had never actually apologized or owned the situation, to which Schofield said, why would I apologize? You've already seen that 700 other journalists did exactly the same thing. ITV responded by saying it would not give out the personal contact details of on-screen talent to the Palace of Westminster authorities, and so the email addresses of programme editor Martin Frizzell and another member of the production staff, who accompanied them, had been used instead. A source involved in the media list told the Mail on Sunday, when they got there, their names weren't on the list, so there were some discussions, and after some back and forth, Phil and Holly were given access and they were ushered through. The whole thing caused a bit of a hoo-ha. Further uproar came about when it was reported that the family of a woman in a wheelchair claimed that she was moved aside to make way for the pair as they entered Westminster Hall. Mia Froggatt took to Twitter to share her anger at her disabled mother being moved out of the way for Phillip Schofield and Holly Willoughby to make it in time for the 10 a.m. slot. Posting a picture taken of the pair, she wrote, This is a photo taken by my sister's husband yesterday after he had queued with my sister, their 10-year-old daughter, and my disabled mum for 13+ hours. My mum was ushered out of Holly Willoughby's and Phillip Schofield's way so they could queue jump without even a thanks. Another witness said, "There was no film crew at the time they walked past us. They were headed towards a side entrance. The lad in front of us started a conversation with them as they went past. Holly removed her mask for a picture." It was later reported that Holly Willoughby and Phillip Schofield shared an emotional SOS phone call about the devastatingly fierce public backlash over Queuegate and spoke for more than an hour before deciding they had to take urgent action. Sources close to Holly said she came close to deleting her Instagram account at one point, which had seen hundreds of viewers leave toxic messages and hate-filled comments written under the picture she posted showing tributes her children had made for the Queen. The source added, "Holly has never had to deal with anger and vitriol like this in her life. It's left her so upset and unable to look at social media over most of the last few days. What was meant to be a lovely tribute to Her Majesty on her Instagram account has been hijacked by trolls." Martin Frizzell, the editor of This Morning, also came under pressure over the lying-in-state queue-jumping furore after being pictured accompanying the media fast track, much to the satisfaction of some staff who were not Frizz fans. At the time, a source said, "Martin carries a mini hairbrush in his bag, and the first thing he does when he gets in every morning is brush his hair. The fact that he's flicking his hair at this now controversial moment is so typically him." Apparently neither Frizzell nor the other man accompanied the pair into Westminster Hall, where they stood in the press pen for 25 minutes. Interestingly, the source continued, "If Frizz does have to go, it might be the beginning of the end for Phillip Schofield. The two men have a mutual admiration society, with Frizzell calling the broadcaster the king." But it's now been claimed that Phil anticipated the furore and tried to warn Martin Frizzell about the predicted reaction from members of the public. Philip is also said to have expressed concerns to ITV over the potential backlash he and Holly Willoughby could spark if they were perceived to be jumping the queue when they paid their respects to the late Queen while she was lying in state, and he was allegedly reassured that there was nothing to worry about. When recently asked about allegations of a toxic culture at This Morning by Sky News, Mr. Frizzell said, "To read between the lines, I think there's some scores being settled." Interestingly, Phillip Schofield has recently stated that he is no longer speaking to Martin Frizzell and he is gone from his life, as is Holly Willoughby. A year on from the chaotic series of events, Lynn Carrott from Pressbox PR gave her view from a PR perspective. She said, "It wasn't a good look. You don't mess with Brits and their queues, as we've clarified. The public felt that Holly and Phil showed a lack of respect by jumping the queue and using their VIP status. It made them look out of touch with people. What made it worse for the pair was that they didn't say sorry. There was an explanation, but no formal apology or signs of remorse. So instead of making the situation better, it riled people up more. Sorry really did seem to be the hardest word for them. Admitting their mistake would have gone a long way in helping them appease the public." While Holly and Phil seemingly made a huge error in judgment, David Beckham, Susanna Reid, and Graham Norton all patiently waited in line and were widely praised for their decision to not gain any special privileges. These celebrities showed how in touch they were with the mourning British public and how personally saddened they were by the Queen's death, Lynn explained. In contrast to Holly and Phil, David patiently waited for 12 hours despite being invited by an MP to have special access. He joined in with the queue camaraderie and posed for selfies with fans. He said he had to queue as that was what his late granddad would have expected. People respected him for it. The public have not forgotten, and many have not forgiven Holly and Phil's actions on that fateful day, and some believe it was the catalyst that ultimately led to their downfall, leaving Holly Willoughby just about clinging on now by the skin of her toothy grin. The Phillip Schofield scandal seems to have resurrected some of that residual public outrage which lingered around the duo following Queuegate, and they have not shaken off the stigma of their actions that day. Phillip Schofield recently shed a little more light on the ramifications he and Holly faced after Queuegate. Speaking to The Sun after the news of his affair with a young runner broke, he said, "There was no jumping of the queue. We went and spoke to everyone in the queue. We went out and met everyone in the queue, then walked all the way around the building, and went into the press center with your accreditation. That got messed up because the production team didn't want to give either of our emails out, so they used work emails which obviously didn't match up with who we are." Phillip said the Queuegate scandal wasn't what caused his and Holly's relationship to deteriorate. He instead confirmed it was the conviction of his brother Timothy that marked a downturn in their friendship. But Phillip went on to say, "So we are forever now associated. It doesn't matter now because I'm not going to go out anymore, but forever now, you go to the butcher's and someone says, 'Oh, do you want to skip ahead?' No, I'll stand here. I'm serious. I don't ever throw anyone under the bus, but I have a very good instinct for these things and I knew it was a bad thing to do." He added, "We were texting each other backwards and forwards afterwards. I said to Holly, I knew I should have gone with my gut, and she said, I know. But we were shell-shocked, the both of us, completely shell-shocked by the reaction." So to conclude, did Holly Willoughby and Phillip Schofield skip the queue? After reviewing all of the information, we believe that the fact that Phillip mentions that he doesn't want to throw anyone under the bus could mean that he believes someone else was responsible for making the decision to skip that queue, in our opinion. So who was it? Was it Holly Willoughby or Martin Frizzell, or both? The fact that Holly allegedly said, "I know," after Phillip said that he should have gone with his gut, suggests that he had made his feelings known to her at the time and they were disregarded. That said, Phillip Schofield most definitely has a mind of his own and he could have made the decision not to attend the lying-in state, as could Holly Willoughby. Blinkerhole believes when initially Holly and Phil said that they did not skip the queue, they perhaps felt that they had to continue to lie about it, fearing that if they actually told the truth, they would be made out to be liars anyway. We believe they just decided to continue to protest their innocence to protect themselves. This tactic seems to be a running theme with Holly Willoughby. She initially said she did not know about Phillip's affair with a young runner and she has decided to continue to protest this, even though the evidence is mounting which suggests otherwise. At the end of the day, both Phil and Holly should have known better, and as they arrived at Westminster Hall and saw the great British public patiently waiting in line to pay their respects to the late Queen Elizabeth II, should have asked themselves the question, which Schofield himself raised a year later. What are the two things you don't screw up? The Queen and a queue. Please like and subscribe for more journeys through the Blinkerhole. For entertainment purposes only. Keep up to date with our latest investigations and hit the join button. If you like what we do, send us a super thanks. Official Blinkerhole merchandise is available in store.